My name is Sonia Bergeron. I'm 30 years old, and until a few weeks ago, I thought I knew what family meant. I thought love and loyalty were enough to protect something sacred, but I was wrong. 3 weeks ago, my grandfather, Charles Montgomery, passed away. He wasn't just my grandpa, he was the man who raised me when my parents were too busy saving their marriage to save me. When I was 8, they sent me to live with him for a summer. That summer lasted 3 years, 3 golden years that shaped everything I am. He taught me how to mend a fence, how to listen to the soil, how to respect the land. Every morning we'd rise with the sun, and at night we'd sit on the porch and watch the stars come out one by one. He'd tell me, "The land listens, Sonia. Treat it right, and it'll never betray you." I believed him. I still do. But people can betray you in ways you never imagine. When Grandpa's will was read last Monday, I went in expecting to hear what he had always told me, that the farmhouse and its 60 acres were mine to protect. It wasn't arrogance. It was what he'd promised me countless times. He said he'd updated his will, made sure everything was in order. Instead, the lawyer, Mr. Davidson, cleared his throat and read words that made my heart drop. The farm, the orchard, the barns, the fields I grew up in, was to be split equally between me and my younger sister, Riley. 50% each. I felt the air leave the room. My parents, Robert and Patricia, sat stiffly beside Riley, and for a moment I saw it, the tiny smirk at the corner of her lips. It was like the walls of my childhood came crashing down. "This must be some mistake," I said, my voice trembling. "Grandpa told me—" Mr. Davidson avoided my eyes. "This will was signed 6 months ago. It's the most recent on record." 6 months ago. That was when Grandpa could barely hold a pen, when I had to help him sign his own name on birthday cards. The signature on the document looked too perfect, too steady. Riley leaned back in her chair, her voice sweet but sharp. "It's fair, Sonia. We both loved Grandpa. Don't make this ugly." "Loved him?" I snapped. "You visited him twice in the last year." Mom sighed dramatically. "Sweetheart, this isn't about who loved him more. It's about what's best for everyone. You can't live there forever. It's too much for one person." "We've already spoken with Thornfield Development. They're offering $2.8 million for the land." Dad nodded, like a business deal had just been approved. "You'll get your share, Sonia. That's over $1 million. You could buy your own place, travel, start a new chapter." I stared at them, speechless. "A new chapter?" I whispered. "You're talking about selling his life's work, the land he built with his bare hands." Mom reached over and patted my arm. "Oh, honey, it's just land." Those 3 words broke something inside me. That night, I drove 4 hours back to the farmhouse. The lights were off, the porch empty. The air smelled of apples and wet soil. I sat in my car, gripping the old photograph I'd kept in my wallet. Grandpa and me on the tractor when I was 10, both of us laughing. The wind rustled the orchard trees. I could almost hear his voice again. "The truth is in the foundation, Sonia. Don't ever forget that." At the time, I thought it was just one of his poetic sayings. But sitting there, heartbroken and angry, it echoed in my mind like a warning. I walked up to the porch, running my hand along the wooden railing he built himself. "I won't let them sell it, Grandpa," I whispered. "I don't care what it takes. I'll fight for it. I'll fight for you." The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages. From Dad. "Be practical, Sonia. Don't throw away your future for nostalgia." From Riley. "Developers are visiting next week. Don't make this harder than it has to be." From Mom. "We know you're emotional, but Grandpa would want you to move on. Let's do this together." I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I called Ethan, my boyfriend. He's a software engineer. Logical, grounded, the opposite of me. He met Grandpa once on a summer visit and respected him instantly. When I told him about the will, there was a long pause. "Son, are you sure he didn't change his mind? Maybe he wanted it to be fair." I could feel my throat tighten. "You think he'd just forget everything he ever told me?" "I'm not saying that," he said gently. "I just don't want you to get hurt fighting something you can't win." I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. I promised him I'd protect this place. Ethan sighed. "Then I'll help however I can, but be careful. Your family plays dirty." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the old rocking chair on the porch, staring at the stars. I thought of Grandpa's trembling hands, his smile, the way he'd whisper, "You're my legacy, Sonia." Now that legacy was being stolen by the very people who called themselves family. I didn't know how to prove it yet, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. That will wasn't real, and somewhere, Grandpa had left me the truth. I just had to find it. 3 nights later, I was sitting in my car outside the farmhouse again, watching the moon rise over the orchard. I'd been avoiding my family's calls, living off coffee and exhaustion. I didn't know what to do next. I just knew I couldn't walk away. Then my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it made my stomach twist. "Hello?" I answered. A raspy voice came through the line. "Sonia, it's Henry Walsh. You don't know me, but I was your grandfather's best friend." I straightened. "Henry, Grandpa talked about you. From his war days?" "That's right," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I need to speak with you about Charles, but listen carefully. Don't tell your family. Not your parents, not Riley. Meet me at the farm in an hour. Alone." Before I could ask anything else, he hung up. When I pulled into the driveway an hour later, an old blue pickup truck was parked near the barn. A frail man with a cane climbed out. His shoulders were hunched, but his eyes, sharp, alert, found me instantly. "Mr. Walsh," I said, stepping out. He nodded. "You look just like your grandfather used to say. Same fire in the eyes." We went inside the farmhouse. The air smelled of dust and memories. Henry sat down heavily at the kitchen table, Grandpa's table, and placed a worn manila envelope in front of him. "Your grandfather knew this would happen," he said quietly. "He never trusted your father. Not after that nonsense with the reverse mortgage years ago. And Riley? Well, Charles saw right through her, too." My breath caught. "Then why did the will?" Henry raised a hand. "That's not the will he meant for you to see." He slid the envelope across the table. "6 months ago, your family visited him. Riley brought Mr. Davidson, said they needed him to sign some updates. Charles was sick, confused from his medication. That night he called me, clear as day, and said something wasn't right. He couldn't remember what he'd signed." He took a shaky breath, then continued. "That's when he told me about this envelope. Said if anything ever happened, if the family turned on you, I was to give it to you myself." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were several documents, a USB drive, and a folded, handwritten letter. The first page stopped my heart. Irrevocable trust. Beneficiary, Sonia Bergeron. My name, in black ink. Henry's eyes softened. 2 years ago, Charles created a trust, not just a will, making you the sole inheritor of the farmhouse and all 60 acres. No one else has any legal claim, and any later documents can't override it. I blinked, tears forming. Then why didn't he tell me? He didn't want to burden you. He said you'd find out when the time was right. Henry reached for the USB drive. That's not all. He pulled out a small portable speaker and plugged the drive in. The sound of voices filled the kitchen. Faint, then clear. Riley's voice. "If you can get him to sign a new will, Mr. Davidson, I'll make sure your firm gets the development sale. You'll earn a $50,000 commission." Then my father's voice. "The old man won't even remember signing it. Sonia's too sentimental to fight us properly anyway." I froze. The room felt cold. I couldn't breathe. Henry placed a comforting hand over mine. "There's more. Charles recorded several conversations after that day. He wanted to protect you." My eyes burned as I unfolded the handwritten letter. Grandpa's shaky handwriting filled the page. "To my granddaughter, Sonia. If you're reading this, it means Henry kept his word. I know what they're trying to do. I may be old and weak, but I'm not blind. The farm is yours. Always has been. The trust cannot be broken. Fight them, my girl. The truth is in the foundation. You'll understand when the time comes. Love, Grandpa." I pressed the paper to my chest, my whole body trembling. Henry looked at me with weary pride. He meant what he said. The truth is literally in the foundation. I frowned. "The foundation?" Henry nodded slowly. "Charles told me once he hid something important in the barn foundation. Said you'd know where to look when the time came." My mind flashed back to when I was 10. Grandpa and I patching a crack in the barn wall. We'd hidden a time capsule behind one of the stones. I stood so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "I know where it is." Henry smiled faintly. "Then go, Sonia. Find what he left you. He trusted you for a reason." I grabbed a flashlight and sprinted toward the barn. The night air was thick and cool, the moonlight slicing across the fields. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. The old barn loomed ahead. The same red boards, the same familiar creak of the doors. Dust hung in the air like smoke as I stepped inside. I knelt beside the foundation where Grandpa and I had worked years ago, running my fingers along the stones. One, near the corner, felt loose. I wedged my flashlight between the cracks and pried. The stone gave way, revealing a small metal safe, coated in dust and cobwebs. My hands shook as I pulled it free. Whatever was inside, I knew it was the key to everything. The truth is in the foundation. Grandpa's voice echoed again in my head. And tonight, I was about to uncover it. The safe was heavier than I remembered. My hands trembled as I carried it into the farmhouse kitchen. Henry was waiting at the table, his cane propped beside him, and a half-empty cup of coffee trembling slightly in his grip. "Found it?" he asked softly. I nodded, breathless. It was right where he said it would be. We used an old screwdriver to pry the latch open. The sound of the metal snapping made my heart skip. Inside were several sealed folders, a small tablet, and another envelope labeled in my grandfather's handwriting. For Sonia, when the time comes. Henry gestured toward it. Go on. He meant for you to see this first. I tore the envelope open. There were photos, legal papers, and a flash drive. The photos made my blood run cold. Riley, my parents, and Mr. Davidson sitting at a restaurant table with men in suits. Developers. I flipped the photos over. Henry's handwriting on the back. Taken 3 months before Charles's death. Thornfield Development. Payoffs confirmed. Henry's jaw tightened. Your grandfather suspected it. I just confirmed it. I stared at the images, the laughter frozen on their faces. They didn't even wait for him to die. Henry reached for another folder. Inside were bank records, attempts by Riley to access Grandpa's accounts using power of attorney forms. Some were rejected by the bank, others flagged as suspicious. And then, the tablet. The moment I pressed the power button, a video file appeared, labeled Charles Montgomery Statement. I tapped play. Grandpa appeared on screen, sitting in the very kitchen where we were now. His face was thinner, his voice weaker, but his eyes were crystal clear. If you're seeing this, Sonia, it means my fears came true. I'm of sound mind today, and I want this recorded so there's no confusion. My farm, all of it, belongs to my granddaughter Sonia. She's the only one who understands its value, not in dollars, but in history. My son Robert and granddaughter Riley see land as money. I see it as memory. She's my true heir. My throat closed, tears blurred the screen. This is my wish, and I've taken legal measures to protect it. There's an irrevocable trust handled by an attorney in the next county. Henry knows everything. And Sonia, if you ever feel lost, look to the foundation. The truth is there. The video ended. I sat there shaking. Henry put his hand over mine, his eyes glassy with emotion. He was a good man, your grandpa. Tough as nails, but kind. He carried me through hell in Vietnam, and I swore I'd protect whatever he loved most. That's you. I wiped my eyes. I can't believe they'd do this to him. To us. Henry nodded grimly. You can believe it. Greed eats people alive, Sonia. But your grandfather saw it coming. A knock at the door made both of us freeze. It was Ethan. His car headlights cut through the darkness as he stepped onto the porch. Sonia? His voice was low, cautious. I quickly tucked the tablet and papers into the safe before letting him in. His face looked tense, like he'd been wrestling with something. I've been calling you all day, he said. I was worried. I've been busy, I said flatly, then glanced at Henry. Ethan, this is Henry Walsh, Grandpa's closest friend. He found proof that my family forged the will. Ethan blinked. Wait, what? Henry explained everything, the recordings, the trust, the developers. Ethan listened quietly, rubbing his jaw. When Henry finished, Ethan exhaled slowly. So, you really think your family did this? I looked at him, almost offended. There's proof, Ethan. Video, documents, everything. They manipulated a sick man. He hesitated, glancing away. I'm not saying you're wrong, Sonia, but Riley called me earlier. My heart stopped. She what? She said you're spiraling, that you're making wild accusations. She sounded concerned. I stepped back. Concerned? My voice trembled with anger. She's the reason this is happening. Why are you even talking to her? Ethan raised his hands defensively. I didn't call her. She reached out to me. She said she ran into someone I know. Layla. That name made my stomach twist. Layla Scott, Ethan's ex. The real estate agent he used to date before we met. The one who still worked with developers. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Ethan sighed. Layla said Thornfield's offer is legitimate, that you're walking away from a fortune. She warned me you might be too emotional about this. I stared at him, speechless. You think I'm crazy? That I made all this up? He looked torn. No, I just want to be sure before you destroy your relationship with your family forever. Henry's cane hit the floor with a thud. Son, this isn't about money. It's about decency. Her family exploited a dying man. If you can't see that, get off this property. Ethan swallowed hard. Sonia, I'm not your enemy. I just want you safe. I crossed my arms. Then trust me, please. He hesitated for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but if you're wrong... I'm not. He left a few minutes later, headlights disappearing down the gravel road. I stood there, heart pounding, trying not to cry. Henry's voice broke the silence. You love him? I thought I did, I whispered, but right now I can't trust anyone. He nodded. Then trust the truth. Your grandfather gave you everything you need. We'll bring this to the right lawyer tomorrow. I took a deep breath and looked at the documents spread across the table, the evidence of lies, greed, and betrayal. The farm was more than just land now. It was a battlefield. And I was done running from the war my family had started. The next morning, I stood outside Martinez and Cone Legal, clutching the folder that held my grandfather's trust documents, the recordings, and my last fragments of faith and justice. Henry waited in the car. His health wasn't strong enough to handle long meetings, but he gave me a reassuring nod through the window before I stepped inside. The receptionist smiled politely. You must be Ms. Bergeron. Mr. Jeremy Martinez will see you now. Jeremy was younger than I expected. Late 30s, sharp suit, eyes that missed nothing. He extended a hand. I read the email you sent with the initial documents. I'll be honest, it's one of the clearest cut cases of elder fraud I've seen in a long time. You have solid evidence. Then we can stop them? I asked, my voice shaking. He nodded. If everything checks out, yes. The trust supersedes the will, and the recordings make their conspiracy undeniable. But prepare yourself. This won't be quiet. Your family will fight back hard. I exhaled slowly. They already have. 2 days later, we met with my family and their lawyers at a small law office in town. Ethan insisted on coming with me, standing quietly by the door. I could feel the tension between us, like a glass thread stretched to its breaking point. Riley arrived in a tailored blazer, her smile polished and poisonous. My parents followed, looking self-righteous and offended, as if I were the one who had betrayed them. Let's make this quick, Riley said. I assume you've come to your senses about the sale. Jeremy placed the trust documents on the table. Actually, no. Ms. Bergeron is the sole beneficiary of her grandfather's estate. The trust predates your so-called updated will and legally overrides it. Mr. Davidson, pale and sweating, fidgeted with his tie. That's impossible. I prepared the most recent version personally. Jeremy clicked his pen. You mean the version your client helped you falsify? He pressed a button on a small recorder. Riley's voice filled the room. If you can get him to sign a new will, Mr. Davidson, I'll make sure your firm gets the development sale. Dad went rigid. Mom covered her mouth, feigning shock. Riley, what is that? But Riley didn't even flinch. Out of context, she said flatly. It's fake. Henry's voice came from behind me. He'd managed to enter quietly during the commotion. Then maybe this will help refresh your memory. He pulled out another recording, this one with my father's voice. The old man won't even remember signing it. Sonia's too sentimental to fight us properly anyway. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jeremy leaned forward. You manipulated a man with dementia. You conspired to defraud your own father, your own grandfather, for profit. That's elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Mom burst into tears. We were just trying to make sure everyone was taken care of. By selling his home to developers, I said, my voice breaking. By erasing his memory for money? Riley rolled her eyes. Oh, please, you're acting like you're some hero. You can't handle that Grandpa finally realized you're not the only one who mattered to him. Enough, Jeremy snapped. We have sworn affidavits from 3 nurses who witnessed your visits, recordings, and bank logs, proving Riley attempted to access Charles Montgomery's accounts illegally. Riley's mask cracked, her face going pale. My father leaned forward, trying to sound calm. Sonia, think about what you're doing. You're destroying this family over a piece of land. I looked him straight in the eyes. No, Dad. You destroyed this family the day you put a price tag on Grandpa's love. He opened his mouth, but Jeremy cut him off. If this continues, I'll file criminal charges by morning. Your best option is to withdraw your claims and sign over all rights to the estate immediately. Outside the office, the cold air hit my face like a slap. I felt lightheaded, both victorious and broken. Ethan followed me out. I can't believe they actually did it, he said quietly. Believe it, I murmured. They sold their souls for $. He hesitated before speaking again. Listen, Sonia, I need to tell you something about Layla. I turned, wary. She showed up at my apartment yesterday, he said. She admitted she'd been talking to Riley. Said they wanted to help me convince you to sell. They offered her a finder's fee from the developer if I talked you into it. My chest tightened. And you? I told her to leave. I told her we're done for good, and that I'd stand with you. His voice cracked. "I'm sorry I ever doubted you." For the first time in days, my anger softened. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice. "Just don't ever let them use you again," I said quietly. He nodded. "Never again." That evening, Henry invited us back to the farmhouse. The old man looked tired but content, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You did good today," he said, lowering himself into a chair. "Your grandfather would have been proud." He handed me a small wooden box, the same one I'd noticed him carrying earlier. "He wanted you to have this once things started turning around. But don't open it yet. Wait until the dust settles." I frowned. "What is it?" Henry smiled faintly. "Something that'll remind you who you're fighting for." Later that night, as I sat on the porch with Ethan, the farm felt different, calmer, almost breathing again. For the first time, I could hear the wind through the trees, without feeling panic rise in my throat. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Riley wasn't the kind to accept defeat quietly. But I wasn't the scared granddaughter she thought she could bully anymore. The war had begun, and I had my truth, my grandfather's trust, and something stronger than greed on my side. Legacy. The next morning, the sky was gray, swollen with clouds that looked ready to burst. It felt fitting, like the world was holding its breath with me. I stood outside the courthouse clutching Henry's hand, waiting for the hearing that would decide the fate of my grandfather's farm. Ethan was beside me, quiet but steady, a reassuring presence. Every time I looked at him, I remembered the night he'd come clean about Layla, and how he'd chosen to stay and fight. We weren't perfect, but at least now we were honest. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. My family was already seated at the opposite table. Riley, polished and defiant, glanced at me with that same smug smile she'd worn during the will reading. My parents sat stiffly beside her, pretending they weren't about to be exposed. Judge Harmon entered. The room fell silent. Jeremy stood, his voice calm and lethal. "Your Honor, today we present indisputable evidence of a coordinated attempt to manipulate and defraud the late Charles Montgomery, a man diagnosed with cognitive impairment. The conspirators include his attorney, Mr. Davidson, and his immediate family members." The defense tried to object, but Jeremy kept going, laying out the documents, bank records, and recordings one by one. The judge listened in silence, his expression hardening as each piece of proof hit the table. Then came the video, Grandpa's clear voice echoing through the courtroom. "My farm, all of it, belongs to my granddaughter Sonia. She's the only one who understands what this land means." The silence afterward was so complete you could hear the hum of the ceiling lights. Mom's tears started almost on cue. "We didn't mean to hurt anyone. We were just—" Jeremy didn't let her finish. "You meant to profit from an elderly man's confusion. There's a word for that, Mrs. Bergeron. Exploitation." Riley leaned forward, her voice rising. "This is ridiculous. He was fine when he signed the will. You have no right to—" The judge banged his gavel once. "Enough, Ms. Bergeron. The recordings and trust documents speak for themselves." Dad tried one last desperate angle. "We're family, Your Honor. Surely—" But Jeremy smiled faintly. "Family doesn't steal from each other, Mr. Bergeron." Henry stood then, shaky but fierce. His voice filled the room like a thunderclap. "I served with Charles Montgomery in Vietnam. He saved my life. I swore I'd protect his family, not from enemies, but from themselves. Sonia here spent 2 years caring for him. Not for money, not for gain, but for love. She's the only one who deserves this land. The rest of them saw a dying man as a bank account." Even the judge looked moved. He cleared his throat. "The court recognizes the irrevocable trust as valid and binding. The will dated 6 months prior is nullified. Ownership of the Montgomery farm and its 60 acres is hereby awarded solely to Ms. Sonia Bergeron." I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, frozen, as his words sank in. The farm, Grandpa's legacy, was safe. Mom's sobs filled the courtroom. Dad sat motionless, his jaw clenched. Riley's face hardened like marble. "You'll regret this," she spat as I passed her. "Maybe," I said quietly, "but I'll regret it on my porch, not in a courtroom." That evening, the clouds finally broke. Rain poured as if the earth itself was cleansing everything. Henry, Ethan, and I stood in the kitchen, watching it fall through the wide farmhouse windows. Jeremy dropped by, unexpectedly, still in his suit, but with a small smile. "They signed the surrender paperwork. It's official. The property is yours, clean and clear. Davidson's being investigated by the state bar, and Riley's real estate license is under review. They won't bother you again." I exhaled, shaky but relieved. I don't know how to thank you. Jeremy grinned. Just invite me to the first apple harvest. Ethan laughed. She'll make you earn your cider. Henry chuckled softly. Then his expression turned serious as he pulled the small wooden box from his coat. You earned this, Sonia. I opened it and gasped. Inside was Grandpa's purple heart resting on a folded note. Sonia, you fought your war and you won. This land is yours. The promise is kept. The tears came before I could stop them. I pressed the metal to my chest, whispering, I did it, Grandpa. We did it. Henry smiled through misty eyes. Told you he was proud of you. Over the next few weeks, the farmhouse began to breathe again. We scrubbed years of neglect from the walls, replanted the orchard, fixed fences. Ethan took time off work to help. He'd never planted a tree before, but watching him dig into the soil with determination made something in me melt. Henry moved into the downstairs room, the same one Grandpa had used in his later years. Natalie, his daughter, visited often, helping with repairs and bringing fresh bread from her bakery. The house that once echoed with silence now filled with laughter, footsteps, and life again. Sometimes I'd stand at the edge of the orchard as the sun went down, the wind whispering through the branches, and swear I could feel Grandpa's presence, calm, proud, eternal. Ethan would come up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. You realize, he'd say, you've turned this place into more than a farm. It's a promise. And he was right. For the first time since Grandpa's death, I wasn't angry or afraid. I was at peace. The fight was over. The legacy was safe. The promise kept. 6 months later, the farm didn't just look alive. It felt alive. The apple trees were blooming again, the soil rich and dark from all the care we'd poured into it. The farmhouse walls smelled of fresh paint and cinnamon from Henry's latest obsession, baking. Every morning, I woke to the sound of roosters and the creak of the porch swing in the breeze. It wasn't luxury, it wasn't glamorous, but it was home. Henry's health had improved so much that his doctor called it a miracle. He always laughed, saying, fresh air and stubbornness, that's my medicine. Ethan still teased him about it every day. On weekends, we opened the farm stand again, Montgomery Orchard, just like Grandpa named it decades ago. Kids from the nearby town came to pick apples, and we hosted veterans' dinners every month, honoring Henry's old friends. There was laughter, guitar music, and sometimes tears when old stories resurfaced. It was a rhythm of peace, until one crisp morning in late October when a black SUV pulled up the driveway. A woman stepped out, sharp suit, calm demeanor. Ms. Bergeron, she asked. I'm Teresa Chen, Environmental Counsel with the Heritage Conservation Trust. I wiped my hands on my jeans, curious. What can I help you with? She smiled faintly. Actually, I think I'm here to help you. Inside the farmhouse, over coffee, she explained that our property sat on a vital watershed, one that supplied clean water to 3 neighboring counties. We've been researching farms that qualify for permanent conservation protection. And, well, she paused, handing me a folder. Your grandfather reached out to us 2 years ago. I froze. What? She nodded. He wanted to ensure that no one, not even future generations, could ever sell or develop this land. We finalized the paperwork draft, but he passed before he could sign. With your ownership, we can complete the process. My throat tightened. Even from beyond the grave, Grandpa had been protecting this place. Henry leaned forward, smiling. That old fox, always thinking ahead. Teresa continued, if you agree, we'll register the Montgomery Farm as a heritage conservation property. You'll retain ownership and farming rights, but development will be permanently prohibited. No subdivisions, no commercial builds, ever. Ethan reached for my hand. This is what he wanted. Tears stung my eyes as I nodded. Let's do it. The signing ceremony was held 2 weeks later under the oak tree at the edge of the orchard, the same one where Grandpa and Grandma carved their initials 70 years ago. Teresa read the declaration aloud. By this act, the Montgomery Farm is hereby protected in perpetuity, ensuring its legacy as a living monument of heritage, love, and stewardship. When I signed the final page, a gust of wind rushed through the branches, scattering golden leaves around us. It felt like a blessing. Henry stood up next, resting one trembling hand on my shoulder. Your grandfather saved my life once. I spent years wondering how I could repay that debt. Now I know. I was meant to help you save what he loved most. Debt paid. There wasn't a dry eye in sight. After the ceremony, Ethan handed me a small pocket knife. You should add your mark, he said softly. I walked to the oak tree. Beneath the carved CM plus RM 1951, I added my own initials, SB 2024, promise kept. When I stepped back, Henry chuckled. Looks good there, kiddo. Ethan wrapped his arm around me, his voice low. He taught you how to fight for love. Now let me help you keep it. I turned, realizing what he meant just as he knelt. Simple, no crowd, no speech, just sincerity. Marry me, Sonia. Let's build our own story here. I laughed through tears, nodding. Yes, 100 times, yes. That night, the farmhouse glowed with life. Henry's stew on the stove, Natalie and her kids visiting, Ethan's hand warm in mine. We ate together around the same wooden table that had seen generations before us. Outside, the orchard shimmered in the moonlight. The old oak stood tall, silent witness to everything: love, betrayal, redemption, and peace. I looked around at the people who stayed when others betrayed me, and I realized something Grandpa used to say finally made sense. Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who stands beside you when the storm hits. And for the first time, I wasn't standing in anyone's shadow. The land was free. The legacy was safe. The promise was fulfilled. As the night deepened, I whispered toward the orchard, "You can rest now, Grandpa. The farm is forever." The wind answered, gentle and soft, like an old man's chuckle carried through the trees.